Jason, Dave, shall we start, or are we waiting for old habits die? Fran, go ahead.
So noting the hour, I'm calling the select board meeting to order.
Noting the time of the President's quorum, I call the Acton Finance Committee to order, noting that one of our members is attending remotely.
Hi, everyone. Nice of you to select a nice, dry, clear evening.
Do what we can, sir.
Hi. Hi, who is that? Is that Allison?
It is.
Hi, Allison. I'm Bart. Okay. So, does everyone in here know each other? You know who you are? Yeah, Corinne. You, okay. A lot of older faces, a lot of younger, in terms of tenure faces. Okay. So let me explain who I am and how I got here briefly. I'm Bart Wendell. My wife Sandra and I are a resident of Acton, South Acton, which is particularly relevant because of the period we lived here. 1979, looking for an affordable house. Started in Lexington in the morning, bought a house on River Street in that afternoon. Stayed there for 25 years, restored the house, and left. And went to Petersam, spelled with an H. You don't pronounce the H. And let me see who that is. Doctor, how do you pronounce your first name? Yang. Okay. I'm Bart. So we just started. So that period, those 25 years were very lively in South Acton. South Acton was pretty much another part of town. Most people didn't think it was part of Acton. They literally thought it was Maynard because it was pretty rundown, more than pretty rundown. We had 3 major fires right in the center in the time I lived there. And at one town meeting, I arrived as a voter to be told that I had set the fire so that we could build a restaurant there. The buggy shop, Greg, you would remember that way back when. That's where the sewers ultimately came from. That's where the village districts ultimately came from. That's where the South Acton Historic District came from. The reason I tell you that is because I have a history. Actually, my wife took most of the heat, but that's how I got knowledgeable about town government. I also was knowledgeable about the schools because I had started out as a high school teacher for a brief time and actually consulted to schools my whole career, among other things. So 35 years ago, we think, is when the ALG started, and I've been finding a way to get here for 35 years, so, which is both a privilege and a pain in the neck sometimes. So, you want to take a vote? We could take a vote. I think we could reach consensus that it's both. Christy.
Could I request that people please use the microphones because I can't hear if you don't.
Say again?
Everyone, please use a microphone.
Closer? Is that what you said?
Everybody else.
Oh,
Everybody else to use a microphone.
He says as he forgets to turn on his microphone. Very good. She just wants to make sure to hear all the side comments in the room.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you other old-timers have the problem. This room, since I've had hearing aids for 2 years, is the most difficult place that I go to hear. There's just one big echo. So if I ask you to repeat yourself, I apologize, but I've aged. So, okay. So that's what I got here, and we'll see if I'm invited back. So tonight, I'm thinking and aiming for an hour. Most people don't complain about an hour. You can get a lot done, hopefully. Jason and Fran, would you take the responsibility of watching the clock and letting us know when it's like 10 of, and we can, at that time, decide what to do about that. But we're definitely not going to go all hours on a Friday night. That doesn't make sense to me. So my understanding of, does everyone know what the ALG is?
Disclosure, I was on the Board of Selectmen 40 years ago when we created the ALG. So if you want to cast aspersions, I'm guilty.
If you could tell us when it was, then we'd have a year. I don't know the year that we started.
We actually started in 1982.
82. Can't count that high. Okay, thanks, Greg. It's good to have institutional memory. So, my understanding of tonight is we're here because these two groups, your two groups, have had trouble finding a common answer for the wish to have a improved building for DPW. And I haven't seen it in 25 years. I'm imagining it looks somewhat like it did 25 years ago. It was already looking pretty unhealthy. Okay. So the idea is to see if we can break the logjam. We may not be able to. In fact, this kind of thing, it's usually 50-50 whether we can. I was surprised different times in my career I braced myself to tell people, well, at best it's 50-50, and have people start cheering and saying, you think it's that good? You know, with this situation, is it really that good? So, okay. So the first thing I'd like you to do, if you'd humor me, is to gather in a small circle with your entity. You might just want to stand because it'll only take maybe 5 minutes. Maybe you guys can be over here and you all can be behind Greg. And what I'd like you to do is coordinate a description to the best of your knowledge of what the stance of the other group is. So you're going to describe what the FinCom believes should happen with this 43 million? Yeah, who's arguing? Potential project, 43 potential project. And you would, as a group, describe what their position is and why. And I'm also gonna, so there's three things. One is, what is it? Two is why. And three is, how strongly do you think that other group of people is going to defend that position against all others on a scale of 1 to 10? Any questions? So we're going to do it fairly quickly. We'll see how long it takes. We can take more time, maybe 5 minutes, do a quickie, and then, but be specific as you can.
Please repeat the three criteria.
What's that?
Please repeat the three criteria.
Okay, first is, what's the position on improving the present facility? Improving or replacing? Might have 3, 4 bullets, 5 bullets. 6. Second is, why? Well, we want to put the equipment undercover, heated, because.
And then priority 1 to 10. Very good.
And then the third is 1 to 10, how strongly do you think they hold that they're attached to that position? Okay? Any other questions? Okay, go for it. If you'd like some paper to jot it down, we got paper and Sharpies here. Okay. You did it, it would seem. So, obviously, this is a reality testing and
The cost of this project is too large, primarily because the timing is so bad, because we've just had large tax increases, and so this is just the wrong time to have this large project. Now, in terms of why the project costs so much, or too much, there's also the feeling that both the scope and the size of the project are too large. There are a variety of, and the belief on that is maybe 8 out of 10. It's a very strong feeling on the FinCom. The specifics of how to cut down the size and scope.
Christie, excuse me, I'm sorry, Jim.
Yep.
What's wrong, Christie? Can you hear us? Christie? Is your microphone on? Yes. She looks like she's lost in space. It's not hearing anything. There you are. Okay, welcome back. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. So we covered, yeah, cost is too large, and the timing is one of the major factors in that, and that the scope and size of the project is too large. That's a very strongly held belief. There are a variety of theories and ideas about how to reduce the size and the scope. Those are not as strongly held or unanimously held by the committee. Yeah, that's the summary.
Anyone want to add to that from the new Finance Committee over here? No, you get it? Anyone from the old Finance Committee wish to comment on the description of your old stance?
I think you're close. So is the scope too large? Yes, I think that's a fairly strong consensus. The second one is timing. Yes, coming immediately after an override is a concern. And when it comes to the details, I think you are also close. There's been a lot of discussion, but we haven't taken hard votes on this is in, that's out. So I think it's fairly close.
Anything specifically that you think is a little off? Greg?
You want me to show my cards ahead of time? Right up my sleeve? Yeah. One of the other things that I think is, and I think I've mentioned this to at least 2 people, is the classic line from Cool Hand Luke, we have a failure to communicate. We, on the old Finance Committee, thought we had transmitted our basic concern about an override in September when we got our point of view to the Select Board earlier than we did a year ago. And it's taken until the end of January for us to have this kind of session. Boy, it would have been great if we could have done it last October.
Okay. Anyone wish to add from, you all approved of Jim's description. Any of you want to respond further to what the new FinCom said? You think they got it? There's not been a failure to communicate. Is that right? There's been successful communication.
There's one aspect, Bart, that I've been trying to bring out, mentioned several times,
Okay.
but it's kind of beyond the scope of this meeting, because I think this project and its scope will close out future projects. We simply will not have the voter support to do sidewalks to do other projects that are scheduled in the near future. I think last year's operating override would not be the end. I think there'll be one in fiscal '27, and on and on and on.
Is there presently a list of requested potential overrides so that you've got that as usual?
No, sir, there's not a list of requested potential overrides. There is a long list of requested capital improvements.
From departments, department heads?
From the municipal side, and the school CIP is forthcoming.
Okay. All right. And you said, Jim, you said 8 out of 10 is how strongly, does that go for most everything you said, or are some things lesser than others?
The timing is wrong, might even be 9 out of 10. That it's too much is 8 or 9 out of 10.
You're being nice. In other words, it's 10 out of 10 on the timing. I sense.
Well, no, there could be somebody on the FinCom who thinks the timing would be okay if the costs were a lot less. And there might, so,
Okay.
you know, there's trade-offs there. But,
Important.
we don't really understand that, by the way. We don't really understand if there's some number that would mean that it would be okay to proceed with. So yeah, that's a mystery to us.
Just to be clear, you understand the concept, but you don't know what the number, you don't know if it's 10 million or 41 million or. Did you know that they don't? Yes. Go ahead, Craig.
Yes, and they don't know the number because we don't know the number either. And one of the challenges that we had as recently as the meeting we had Wednesday night was it was unclear if it was 43 million, hence the joke, is that the working number? Yeah, it's as good as any other. There is still value engineering being done, which means we're not entirely clear what the number
Right.
is. So we're trying to work as best we can with
Right.
numbers that are fluid.
So it could be 10% plus or minus? Is that, Dean, is that or whoever, the final number, I don't mean after construction, but before construction could be plus or minus something, David?
So we started at 47 million for this building, and through value engineering reduced it to 43, and that's the entire project cost, not just the building cost. And we're still working to reduce it, but the progress slows down, right? It's,
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
so I would list the $43 million now as the worst case, and we're going to try to reduce it more.
Okay.
And, and we are very delighted that the select board agreed to reduce the 47 down to 43 based on recommendations from the finance committee that we do the construction as rapidly as possible as opposed to phasing it in over 2 years, which expands the cost. So in that sense, we were communicating and we were in agreement on that step.
So you
So
have,
wait, I need to jump in here. I'm sorry.
okay.
I am very happy to hear that our position, our two-pronged, two main thrust prong of not at this time and not at the scope, I'm glad to hear that they've received both of them. But I'm not going to give that 40 million is an acceptable number either. And for the simple reason of just looking at their own Weston and Sampson report from just a couple of years ago.
You're not, but I wanted to know what the group was gonna.
Fair enough.
Do you stand apart from the rest of the FinCom on that? or-
You would have to pull them individually, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I 100% agree with Jason. I agree with Jason. Like, I thought the first number I heard was 40 million. Like, and that was before, I think, the number came in, and then it was 47, and then they came down to 43. It's just like, but that's still higher than 40. And like I said, in my mind, 40 was still too much.
So there's been early success, but not that it doesn't feel that way to some of you, because it may have started somewhere else. Yeah?
So I also agree, and I also think that if you look at different estimates during the the timeline of this project, the number has gone up from 27 to 37 to 47, it went down. So what concerns me is that it might be right to do it like the way it is, like 27, but when the price went up, it is still the best way to do it in this scope and the size and the timing, or should we reconsider the scope?
Okay.
That's, the price has gone up, and that might be the time to reconsider the scope.
So it might be helpful to track the history of the 40, 47, 43, but we don't have time. So I'm going to just put that aside for now, unless we think it really might add something to what we're talking about.
No, sir, it's all too high.
All too high. Got it. Okay. So 8 out of 10, is that a fair description of your commitment to what you're advocating? 8 out of 10 is high. It's not rigidly high, but it's right on the edge. Yeah? Christie?
We have asked for some information, financial information, to help justify the cost, and have not received that feedback, such as how much would it shorten the lifetime of the equipment if it was left outside as opposed to in the giant warehouse. There are ways to quantify this, but with this very tight timeline that we've been given to get this into the spring town meeting, we need that information yesterday.
Okay. So is that news in any way to the select board? Dean?
So I think, obviously, it is a very tight time frame that we're working under in order to get to town meeting. And with the constant increase in construction costs, there's a rationale behind pushing ahead with this as quickly as possible. We've provided, I think, a huge amount of information that's available on the project website. Some of the numbers that people have been asking for, we just got today, or 2 days ago, specifically as far as the energy costs of the new building, the cost of the equipment. All those things are being developed. So and we're going to be pushing ahead for another estimate, probably in another couple of weeks as things are fine-tuned. Some of the questions that we're still working with Winston & Sampson and their engineers, for instance, is looking at the ground source heat pump wells, how many wells we actually need. They came in with a high number initially. Now they're scaling that back, but we still don't have enough data to prove that the lower number is going to be adequate.
Can you give can you give a ballpark guess of when you'll have most of the information you're going to have?
We've got another building committee meeting set up for 12th of February that we pushed real hard at the meeting that Greg was at on Wednesday night. So I think we'll have more information then. But the problem is, if you push hard and try to get an early estimate, they haven't completed the design documents. So it's the further out that you push doing the final estimate, the more accurate the information is, but then obviously you're getting really close to town meeting.
Yeah.
So, whatever we've come up with, what's ever been presented to us, has been made available on the website. And, in the past, people said, well, we didn't see it, but,
So
whatever we've got, we've given to you.
Christie?
Dean, I hear what you're saying, and the disconnect is that we are not getting what we are asking for. I appreciate that you are sharing everything you have, but we have asked for very explicit, quantifiable information and have not received it. And we cannot do our financial due diligence without the financial information we're looking for.
Choose between you.
I think we've made some progress here. I think if if the Finance Committee could come up with, a written list of exactly what other information you don't have that you're still looking for, we can work that document. I've been under the impression that we've been fulfilling all your requests, and obviously, if you don't think you've got it, then you haven't got it. So if we could get something in writing from FinCom saying exactly what it is that's the pieces of information that are still missing, that would be helpful. We can turn it over to the architects. We can work it with the project team. Thank you.
Okay. So it's important in a situation like this not to go back to a defensive position where you're judging, well, how's that possible? How is it possible you haven't heard answers and so on? It's not going to get us anywhere. So whether you believe that or not. So maybe before we stop, we can figure out how, if you wish to, you can come up with your most current list of unknowns, questions, everything you want to have answered before you move forward. And Dean, should you be the recipient of that? And then you can tell them, be a good idea at the time, let's aim for 2 weeks or a week or whatever it is and make an agreement right then and there. Maybe the chair be party to that, so there's no misunderstandings. So how long is the list? How long would it take you to write it up, you think? Jason, what's your sense?
I'm happy to start now. I don't know how long it would take. I would fear that I wouldn't capture everything, but I'm more than willing to give it a shot.
I'm also willing to take a different cut at it.
Same task.
Same task, different approach.
Steve?
Yeah, as part of my comments to the town manager just before the first budget session, questions on the capital plan, I submitted a list of questions. So it had been a couple weeks ago. And as is our procedure, I copied the chair, and I believe I copied you too, David, as a FinCom liaison on the questions. So it's a start. Other people may have other questions.
We're happy to start.
Okay, so hold that. Thank you, Jason, hold that. It's clear that there's some passing in the dark. Whether there should be, I'm not interested, but I'm sure you would be, but we can come back to that if we need to. So before we leave tonight, let's make a decision whether that's something you could do in 5 minutes right here, or you should go home and forward it. Make sense, Dean and Jason and Greg and Steve? So make a plan, one way or the other. Either do it before we leave or in the next day or two. Yeah.
I just want to clarify, Steve, the questions you've already asked are still outstanding. Is that a correct or incorrect statement?
They're still outstanding.
So there's already questions that have been sitting for
Yeah.
a couple of weeks.
Yeah, sounds like we should start over, as annoying that it may be. What are the questions that are outstanding so they're in one place? And what's the agreement on when you're either you all will say, here's the answer, or I just can't get the answer and I can't even tell you when. I have no control over it. It's with the consulting engineers, or it's with the state, or whatever. Okay. The main thing is to say, this is where it's at. This is what you can expect from me. I'm going to disappoint you because I can't come up with the answer. I know what I think it is, but that's probably not a good idea. Okay? So let's park that for a minute. Okay. The 8 out of 10, that's good? Good description for all of you?
No, we have a different number. Is it our turn to pretend to be them?
I hate to say it, but I still didn't hear what you said.
Is it our turn to pretend to be them?
8 out of 10 is how committed?
We think they're at a 10.
Okay.
I think the question is about whether they thought our
Okay.
how strong we are.
We're hearing that they think we're at an 8, yes.
Yes.
We acknowledge that we hear that they
Okay,
think we're
thank
at
you.
an 8.
My problem is I'm just having trouble hearing. So where do you think you all are? Let's go down and just shout out a number in general. Doctor, go ahead.
9, 10.
So to me, I think I still don't understand like what if we're not arguing against the need of having to do something with the DPW building, but our position is like the cost and the scope. It's on the cost and scope. And if you're asking about our position on the cost and scope could be different, the cost and scope are different, my position will be 8 or 9.
Okay.
But it's on the possibility of the scope and the size could be different, not on the
Okay.
need on to have a.
And you all heard that?
DPW building.
Yeah. Roland?
Are we talking about the timing at all? Is it just size and scope right now? Because timing was a big issue too.
Timing?
Feel free to give both.
So timing, I'm a hard 10. And scope and.
So they're absolutely committed to doing it this spring?
What do we think they?
I
are
think
thinking
they,
is?
well, yeah, I mean, that's their number one goal. So, right? So I think they're a 10 on.
Okay, let's keep going.
Is that where we think the
They are.
same, I agree with Corinne,
I know it's confusing.
10?
Oh, no, that's not what she was answering. Were you answering where the FinCom stands?
I think, no, wait, okay, I am getting confused. They think, wait, so this is where they think we are?
Where do they stand? How firmly do you think they're holding on to?
They are, I think they are a 10 in their position.
Okay, 10,
So if asking about where they're standing, I also think that they are 10.
10, 10, Roland, did you say 10?
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
We didn't hear their points. You're asking for their number, but we didn't hear what their points were. So we listed our bullet points and what our number was and our
Yeah,
perception of them.
we're talking about you guys.
They haven't listed their.
I know.
So that's where they're confusing the number. They're listing their own number. We said 8.
Yeah.
Where they stand.
So let me, and I understand it's confusing. I only ask confusing questions. The question is, now that you've described their stand.
We haven't described their stand yet. We have not described their
Oh,
stand
wait,
yet.
I'm confused. Now that you've described FinCom, right, how firmly do you feel they're holding on to that stand? How firmly do you think they are in that stand? Think of hardcore Trump supporters, hardcore progressive Democrats. How likely are they to change? I would start usually with a 10 on each side, and then, as an example. So what I'm asking of Dave.
So we said FinCom's held their beliefs at least an 8.
Okay,
Probably more than an 8. but
yeah,
at least an
8 plus. Does that make sense to you? Do you feel like that's how firmly you're holding?
We understand that that is their perception of our opinion.
And now reality test it. Tell me what you think.
So now, if I'm
ahead.
hearing you properly.
Yes, go ahead.
You're asking how strongly do we feel in our position,
Yes,
even though we've not yet described our opinion?
thank you, Jason. Go ahead.
Very good. So in our position, how strongly do we feel ourselves about our position that this is not the time nor the scope? Gang?
This is not the time and the scope. To me, would be a 9.
Okay,
Time is a 10, and scope and expense is a 9.5.
okay. Roland?
I'd say 9 for both.
Okay,
I'll go with 9 for both.
I'm an 8 on the timing. I was willing to engage in September, and I'm a 10 on the scope.
okay, great.
I would say at this time, I'm a 10 on the timing. I don't think we can do it between now and town meeting, and I'm an 8 on the scope.
Steve?
9, across the board.
Okay, Allison?
I'd say on the facts that I have today, I'm a 10.
Okay, 9 or 10, basically. And Kristen?
I really want it to be a 6 on the scope, but we have been, I feel like this timing has pushed us into needing to come up with a decision and approval of things like scope that we just can't reach in this amount of time. So I'm definitely a 10 on the timing with the information we currently have. And that's going to put me
Okay.
on a high number on the scope too.
Okay, so let me say out loud what's obvious from between the lines. There seems to be a sense from FinCom members that somehow this call negotiation conversation has not been effective, and that time has passed, and in spite of there should have been progress by now, there's not. So if there's going to be progress, we're going to have to get past that frustration. I'll put a nice word on it, frustration. Make sense, Fran?
Well, I just have a quick question, because I'm confusing timing. I'm hearing from some FinCom members that it's timing from town meeting, or is it timing because of the override? So that's what I wanted to clarify.
It's the override.
Okay.
And there was, not everybody here would be aware of it, but there was a general agreement, sense of the meeting agreement that a couple years ago, that future overrides would be announced as early as possible, because the experience of the town was, it's almost always too late to get an override going, so you have to. Christie, quickly?
For me, it is as much the timing about getting this in for a Springtown meeting. To get into the feelings a little, it felt like the select board presented, this is going to happen for the spring, without having answered our questions. So I felt like my opinion really didn't matter and got brushed aside.
Okay. And I won't ask about a town meeting June 20th or something like that.
May 6th. May 6th.
But that's your new current schedule, May 6th, yeah. So you can have town meetings up to the
June
30th. Or you don't want to, but Dean.
So I guess if I could hear, is there any consensus in the Finance Committee, putting aside the issue of scope and size of the building and total cost, is there a consensus from the Finance Committee as to when a better time is? Are we pushing it out a year, 2 years? At this point, we can argue for years about size and scope, but I'm specifically looking like, if we can just take one of the objections out of the way, what time frame do you think is appropriate?
So I'd like to take a crack at that, if I may. Our initial, when we first had the point of view conversation this year, our initial answer was FY29, but I want to be very clear. I don't want there to be anything lost in translation. Timing is only half of it. We were asked at the last ALG meeting by the moderator of that ALG meeting what the worst case scenario would be. What would be so bad if we didn't get to consensus this year? And let me be very clear. Pushing it off a year or two and coming back with the same project that is riddled with things that we believe as a committee are wants and not needs would be a mistake.
Okay.
So it is a two-pronged issue. To answer the question that you specifically posed, I would say I would like to bring this up in fiscal year 29 on a right-sized project.
Okay, so that's a clear statement, Jason. So looking at the clock, David, important point?
Well, I feel like they've made their points, and we haven't had a chance to make
Here
our
I am.
points. Sorry?
Now's the time.
Okay, so a couple of things that I think are important here. Is first, I think that this is the right-sized project. How would you make it smaller?
Hold on a sec. I'm not ready to moderate a,
No, that was a rhetorical question. I'm sorry.
We have answers.
Can I?
it's rhetorical?
Well, okay, I won't put a question mark in my statement.
Okay, so let me back up.
Can I make my point, or can I not make my point?
I'm considering, since we need to figure out how to work time into this. The subject is time. How about this, David? I understand. Why don't you just make the statement, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so the garage part of the building is even not quite big enough to hold all the pieces of equipment that we have now. And we couldn't make it smaller without forcing equipment outside, and I can talk about that in a second. The office part is just big enough to hold the office workers we have. The shop part is big enough to hold the shop work we have. Basically, it is not an oversized building, right? It cannot be cut back, I think, without being a bad value for the town. Why would we build an inadequate building? That makes no sense to me at all. That's just a waste of taxpayer money.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in, David. I understand you're not finished. Is there anyone on the FinCom for which David's point is new? You've all heard that explanation. Okay, so I want to just stop where we are for the moment and not get into the weeds, because the idea of this was to do something a little different than get back into the weeds quite yet. Frustrating, but that's the plan. Would you all quickly, someone on your group, describe what you think the Board of Selectmen's position is, why they hold it, which David just started.
So I'm supposed to explain why,
No, he does not want an answer to the space question. He wants you to run down that list.
so I'm supposed to say what we think the select board's position?
Yeah, we're reality testing whether you each understand
Okay.
the other's position.
So-
Is everyone clear on that?
And we've written it down, so it's there. So we think the select board wants to rip down the old building and build the Taj Mahal, unquote. Also called White Elephant, but Taj Mahal got more votes. Why? Because if we don't do it now, it'll just get more expensive next year and the year after and the year after that and the year after that. And if we go to town meeting and it fails this year, no problem, we'll just bring it back next year and we'll bring it back again and again until it passes.
Okay.
We believe everything is vital that we put into this 46,884 square foot facility. Hint, that's a number we can talk about. We think that the electric future is absolutely essential at all costs. We think we are
Immovable.
immovable. This is just what's right.
So they're confident that they've got the right answer?
Yes, we think they're
Yeah,
attentive
okay.
in their defense of their position. We think that they miss the fact that there are, I can't read that.
So
that we're
I'll jump
not
in on
under-
this one. The select board doesn't understand that the finance committee, doesn't understand why the finance committee doesn't see all of this as a need.
Right, okay. Timing is sooner,
I'm sorry,
not
Fran,
later.
did you have a question?
Need.
As a need versus a want.
Everything in there is a need. We think you think that.
Okay.
Timing, you know, why is that an issue? Because inflation is more important than the fact there was an override a year ago that only passed by 45 votes, but who's counting?
Okay.
Just trust us. We know what we're doing. We're elected officials. You're just appointed. We've heard that. We think the select board thinks that they are providing us with the why we need this scope of building. And we think the FinCom will fall in line eventually because they have to.
Was there something else?
The next page is the answer to the question of how strongly do we feel the
10.
select board wants to do this come hell or high water this year.
Okay. Anything else to add?
The next slide is the whys of what they're doing.
Okay.
Thank you, gang. Christie, do you need to jump in right now?
Yes, I just wanted to add that the select board thinks that the citizens can afford this.
That's on the why, that's on the
Can
why
afford,
slide. It's on the
can
why
afford
slide.
it.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Okay.
So they think this is the best time. Sooner is better than later. So they're more concerned about inflation than the people that we've been hearing from at, let's say, listening sessions.
Don't add your opinion.
Sorry. You're right. I'm slipping, aren't I? They think it will pass on the override, and they think it will pass even though it requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting. And if it doesn't, they're not afraid if it fails. They think that there will have no ramifications down the road. They think it will help recruit employees.
Which it will. We agree with that.
We agree with that. We think there are health issues. We think they think there are health issues. We agree with that.
But we disagree on how to solve them.
Well, some of us do. We think we can afford this. We're hearing otherwise from the people we hear from. They
Paid. They
Oh.
paid last year.
A year ago, during the override scramble, the select board feels that they cut deeper than they needed to help the schools out, and now it's time for them to sort of catch back up again. And I think that's it.
Okay. So I'm going to jump right to the current Board of Selectmen. Do you wish to disagree with any of those things, or are they accurate? Jim?
At least for this select board member, we've never discussed what happens if it doesn't pass. So the assertion that we already have a plan to bring it back year after year at the same size and scope, maybe somebody else is saying that, but, or maybe even somebody else on the select board is saying that, but it hasn't been a select board position.
It hasn't come up in a meeting. And are you saying it hasn't come up outside when you're talking with?
Well, no one's ever talked to me about it, but, you know,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it hasn't been discussed.
You can only speak for yourself. Fran?
I can speak for myself too, and that has never come up. And I.
Did everyone catch that? I'm sorry.
And I don't know if anyone heard my ouch at the last thing that was read, because we had an override for the school. We think the town, that is, ouch.
So you don't agree with that the town feels it's due?
Right.
Tit for tat, what's the? There's a legal term for trading. Quid pro quo, thank you, those Latin scholars. Dean?
Yeah, the one point that I strongly agree with the Finance Committee is that the Select Board does indeed feel that everything in that building is a need and not a want.
Okay.
No debate on that at all.
Anyone else? Dave, you want to jump in?
So I agree with a lot of things on the second sheet. I don't agree with a lot of the things. I mean, I don't quite understand the comment about the Taj Mahal, whether we think it's the Taj Mahal, right? So I don't quite understand that. I agree with Dean that we think that This is a right-sized building with no extras in it. It's all I need. There's no extra space in it. It's not.
So it's a need. It's
It doesn't
needs.
have extra features in it, you know.
My apologies, David, I was projecting our opinion on yours.
So the Taj Mahal phrase,
Is us, not, if I were trying to speak for the select board, they would not use that term.
so so the feeling behind that was that the select board is going after,
I was editorializing, I apologize.
okay. David?
Art, I believe we've,
Sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. No, please.
So, I mean, I think, you know, from my point of view, you know, we were certainly not trying to, so first of all of our discussions are completely public. They're in open public meetings. We've discussed the details of the building in many public meetings. They're all open and available, and you can go watch them. So you don't have to imagine too much what we think. I think we think this is everything here is a need. It's not, there's no, you know, anything smaller than this is not responsible.
So they got it right.
They got.
That key point.
Yes, and I think a lot of things on the, you know, there's a few things on their first sheet which I think are not correct, but.
Which are they? Can we?
I'd have to go back and get the list again, but most of the things on the second sheet I think are right.
So there's one I didn't recognize. The electric future, is that it's too early to design because everything might be electric in the future? Is that what that? No. Oh,
So that's our current law here. We can't use fossil fuels in new construction.
And I believe we've come across the true crux of the problem here. I believe we have found the root cause of the diametric disconnect between these two boards. Everything in this project, they believe, is a need. And we are saying point blank, we disagree with them. We disagree with them on covering every piece of equipment. We disagree with them on
Okay.
we disagree with them on the truck wash.
So what you just said covers everything.
We disagree with,
Okay. I'm being impolite because I'm trying to be respectful of you not missing the Bruins or
that, and I talk too much. Thank you.
whatever you want to run home for.
The other thing I picked up on that I think is structurally accurate is that the select board, you know, we have town staff working for us. We get a lot of information. We have relatively easy access to the town manager. So there's and the finance committee doesn't. You know, and I get that frustration that you write memos asking for things and it takes a long time to get information. And you often can't get information answered right at your meetings because there's nobody there with the answers. I get how that can lead to this big disconnect where, you know, the select board's been following the details of this project for a while, you know, pleased with it since it's, you know, it's scary. It's scary. The cost is scary, but we've been connected the whole time. And you guys are often out of the loop and feeling out of the loop, and that can lead to.
Jason, don't jump across the table. Do you want to just say a sentence of what you're thinking?
How dare you boil this down to we don't get it? We've been
I don't mean that. I don't mean that.
viewing this since last summer, where we said this is too large a scope and not the right time.
And
When we
can I
ask for
just-
questions,
Tensions need to be, you need to
when
level.
we ask for questions and we don't get answers, that is for us to pursue. To say that we don't understand or that we don't have the accurate information, you're right, we don't have the accurate information. We have the information that's presented to us.
Okay, I'm
2
going to
years
jump
ago-
in. Jason, I'm going to stop you right there. Jim, I think you were trying to be conciliatory. There, let me state the obvious. With the 46 years of Massachusetts municipal structure experience that I have, as someone who's worked in every kind of organization there is all across the country, Fortune 100, DC agencies, the whole kit and caboodle. The most complicated finance, I think, is municipal finance, particularly school finance, but municipal. I also think there is an inherent tension between the FinCom, any FinCom, and any Board of Selectmen. I'm hearing some of the things I heard the first month I arrived in Acton. I'd never lived in a Massachusetts, I'd never been around Massachusetts governance before. These tensions are there, elected, appointed, staff, not staff, respond to us, don't. So all I can ask at this point is that you put that down, as true as it may be from your viewpoint, and that to get any chance of getting anywhere, going to have to figure out a way to just get past that stuff. Being on a FinCom is a brutal task in terms of, you don't get you may disagree, you don't get the public censure as often as these guys do, I think, but you operate half the time, you're an advisory board, first of all. You don't have authority. That's no fun. And in fact, when people ask me about Acton, I tell them that the FinCom has more power here than any town I've ever been around. You may have a different experience, but that's my experience. Does it have as much power as it should? That's another question. So here's what I would like to ask right now, which is something Jason mentioned, I think Jason mentioned from the last ALG meeting that Joanne ran. I was out of commission. What's the worst case here? You don't agree. You just don't agree on anything. You don't have a proposal to bring, that you agree on to bring to town meeting, okay? Not 43,000, not 40, not 20, not, a tent erected on July 4th, nothing. You don't have any of that. What's the worst part of that? What's the worst consequence?
Can we talk about the taxpayers for a minute? I think the worst case scenarios is that a lot of people find that we cannot afford to live here, and they keep seeing the tax bills going up, and that's the concern that we heard from the listening sections.
So the worst concern is coming up with something that is not affordable. So not coming up at all is better than, at least for now, is better than something that's not affordable. Is that fair?
Again, we're not arguing, we recognize the need. We recognize the need, but is this the only way to do it? Is this the only scope to do it? What concerns me is that if you're looking at the cost estimate 2 years ago, and then you see the cost keep going up. When the cost keep going up, the thinking that we had at the beginning might need to change, just like ordinary taxpayers, ordinary families make their decisions. They think there's a need to have a 4-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
But when the cost keep going up, they might need to think about alternatives. They cannot, you think the taxpayers in Acton can get what they need? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So the point I'm making is that alternatives, when the cost keeps going up, what are the alternatives?
Okay.
Let me give one more point
Okay.
I want to make. Just like I look at the documents that from the project website, and then one idea that has been raised by a meeting and a select board has responded is that that's not possible to outsource some of this storage or the maintenance to a private sector, because the cost of that annually is per square footage, how much a year. And now when we see the construction costs keep going up and the going wage keep going up, maybe it's time to revisit other options. It's just all the needs and the budget considerations should come together.
Thank you. So,
There's another
great.
and I hate to use the word political, but there's another political consequence that I think some of us are concerned about.
Yeah.
Back in the 1990s, 1993, 94 through 99, there were 4 failed overrides. And what we have, I think, a concern with is let's just throw it out there, and we can always, if we get lucky, it passes, and if it doesn't, then we'll fall back and come back with something different, has a potential. We can't prove it.
So you don't want to go back to that political place where you can't get most anything passed?
Bingo.
Okay, I'm going to ask anyone else want a worse consequence of not agreeing?
So I don't think it's just the failure at town meeting, it's the failure and complete loss of trust of the public, right? Because if you fail and you think, oh, we'll just bring it back next year, things may be different.
Okay.
But it's similar to Greg's point, if you've just lost the trust of the people in the process, you've got angry constituents lining up at the mic to talk about how they hate the proposal, they'll never vote for it, then it's just not, I'd want to put something forward.
That has a chance.
Right, that has a chance that
Okay.
I'm proud of, that I could justify. I know that we don't all have to agree on what's put forward, but that's what I would like.
That old congressional thing, you don't bring no vote, something you're not sure will pass. You wait until you get the votes. Okay. Thoughts on what's the worst consequence of not getting a project going that you can all present, you can agree on to present? Dave?
Well, the first thing, the first consequence is just the voters decide. Right? We don't decide, the voters decide.
So you're saying that's not necessarily
I
bad?
think that's pretty democratic, right? That's not terrible.
Okay.
I'm not afraid of that.
Okay, point taken, Fran.
And in fact, I was in one of their lists, right? I agree with that.
Okay.
And the worst consequence for me is that, we don't build an adequate building, right? And then what do we do? I mean, the situation is pretty dire. We've held off for a long time on this to try to give, financial space for things. We decided in 2022 with a study committee what the general scope of the project should be. Town meeting voted for the design for that scope. The next year, $1.2 million. We fulfilled the design of that. If now we go back to them and say, we're not doing this, you guys spent $1.2 million, we're just going to throw that out.
Okay.
And then come back 2 years later at $6 million more, I think that's not acceptable, right? And so that's, to me, the worst case for taxpayers.
I see you, Christie. Was there someone among the selectmen?
I don't know if this is appropriate, and I'll go through you, Bart, but I did see several finance committee members at the tour at the DPW on Saturday, and I just wanted to get a feeling from them what kind of working conditions for our employees do you think that the current DPW holds? I would love to know.
How about if you
I don't know
mind?
if I phrased that very well.
No, I hear,
but-
if you don't mind, given the time,
Yep.
would you say what you think the condition, would you describe the conditions and we can see if people agree? Is that all right, Fran?
I can describe the condition as a building that is so overdue in its life expectancy. I see ceiling tiles that might fall at any moment. I see unsafe conditions for the people who provide services to our town, not adequate space, not locker space. I learned there was an infestation of feral cats that they had to deal with. There's an infestation of rodents. I just think we owe it to our town employees. It's a municipal building. I mean, if you.
So unacceptable health
Completely,
and working conditions. And safety, I imagine, is part of that, or
yes.
would you add safety? Okay. So without getting in a discussion of that right now, because that's the weeds that we don't have time for. here's what I think. Consensus is I'm going to just keep going because it's 20 after 8. And if, after I speak my piece, if you want to jump in, give you a minute. Let me ask this. Is there anyone here who thinks there's much chance of reaching any agreement on anything in time for both boards to feel they can move forward? Is there anyone who feels there's even a fair amount of hope? Kristen, so that's one. We got one.
May I ask a question about that? It's not quite an answer.
All right, go ahead.
Would understanding each other's positions better count for that? I don't think we're there yet, but I think we have a chance to understand each other, where we're coming from out of this meeting to advance us further, but I don't think we are there yet.
Okay. So generally, you all know that consensus is for tough issues. And the reason it's tough is because there's not agreement, and they're important issues, and people don't want to give up what they feel needs to happen. And the general rule of thumb, in my experience, is that if both sides aren't feeling a bit desperate about what if we don't agree, there's no chance of reaching consensus. Right now, I don't hear a lot of, I hear anger, I hear frustration, I hear worry, but I don't hear desperation about, oh my God, we gotta find an agreement here. The ALG grew out of desperation from, I remember it as Nancy Tavernier, who was to tears in 1982, that there was no way ever gonna get town meeting to pass anything if the boards were fighting. Her exact words, I think, is if we don't get along, how do we expect the town to get along? And that's when the whole thing started. So I'm going to try to bring this to a close, and here's the homework for you, whether I'm present or not on this subject, which I'd be glad to be, well, not 100% glad, but I'd be willing to. I mean, it's a tough subject. I do like talking about equipment, though, but we haven't talked about equipment very much, so that's not satisfying that itch. I want you to talk among yourselves about whether you think there's enough desire to bend in order to reach some kind of an agreement. Because if there's the desire for bend, the willingness to bend is not going to come out of desire to bend. The willingness for bending is to come out of desperation. We got to come to town meeting with a joint proposal. I see it, Christy. And so you need to decide that, because if you don't feel it's there, then I don't want to waste your time. That's my observation. Anyone have a question about that? Okay. I think this discussion, it would have been great if it happened in September. I think most everybody agrees on that. I see that there's communication potholes between the two boards. That's not new. I think it's built into the system. I don't look for blame for that. Dean and Fran, it might make sense for you to let this board know that any request should come to one specific person, just to make sure, they know who they should hold responsible to get an answer. And no extraneous phone calls or pieces of paper, because it's too easy for things to get lost. It's just too easy. So,
I just wanted to speak to the tour. If that's okay for you?
Sure, go ahead.
Just a couple seconds. I had never been to the building, and I had listened to multiple presentations about the dire need of the building, and I have a completely different impression after walking through it. I thought the building was falling down, and different impression. And the staffing, I agree that the staffing that is there is in a not ideal situation, but I don't think the staffing needs to be there as well. They weren't always in the same building historically, and
Okay.
and I also feel that companies today don't build office space for staff anymore because there's plenty of office space around. So there's a lot of issues with the building, but I don't, my impression of the building was actually better.
Than you
after
thought?
Then I walked through it, because I
Yeah, okay.
saw the images of the cracks and everything, and
Interesting.
it looked like a good structure to house equipment,
Yeah.
but it was
So-
terrible for staff.
So your important point just points to how the need and the want is like, if you didn't see the need, then how are you going to support that it's a need? And it may be obvious
Sorry.
to you, Fran, but the problem
But
is.
can I
it's-
just interject? You said you felt it was fine for equipment, but not for staff.
That's correct.
Right, okay.
And that's what, but I don't think the staff has to be, I don't think you need to build a spot for staff. I think you could, there's a
Lease.
lot of other alternatives for staffing.
It might be the ideal, but you're saying you don't, in your experience, you don't think it's essential.
I think it's essential to fix the staffing situation, but I don't think it's essential to build a brand-new building for the staffing.
Okay.
So,
So I suggested the homework is to decide whether you think there's a chance, and a chance of a jointly supported proposal, design, a jointly supported ask for 43 million or whatever it is. That's the first order of business. If there's not, then I wouldn't waste any more time on it. However, if you're willing to keep going and we can find a way to squeak the time out, I don't see why not just give it the college try, meet again. But that's, the first thing is you got to feel like there's some chance that there's, if you feel like the voters should decide and there's a reasonable chance they'll pass it, then I would wonder if you're motivated to reach a consensus. That's not a criticism, it's just a statement of human condition. Christy, and then Steve.
I have perceived a decline of respect between the two boards over the last year or so, and would be concerned that if we do not discuss this further and attempt to understand each other further, that will continue. Part of my hope for having this meeting was to have open discussions. I know that we don't like what we've heard from each other necessarily, but I think it is to the best benefit of everyone in Acton that these two boards be able to have a difficult discussion with significant hearing on both sides. It is not clear to me that I've heard a lot of not just listening, but hearing each other tonight.
Okay, and Steve?
Yeah, I was going to say that it was not my first tour, it was probably my fifth. And I'm kind of with Scott. The maintenance area is messy. I did finance work for a lot of manufacturing companies, and all maintenance areas are messy. But I don't go back far as Dean on this one, but there was a couple of studies done 2012, 2013. One was about space needs for all the buildings in the town. One was on the conditions of the building. The space needs guy cited a lot of the same things we're talking about now. He said it was too small, they needed more vehicle storage. I don't think his calculation was right then. But he said you should just build a separate little office facility and get the people out of the same building where the maintenance is being done, and then use that space for more vehicle storage. In fact, drew up a little picture of it, actually. And he suggested a three-sided open garage, like we have at the police station, only taller, for the vehicle storage. Again, but he wasn't talking the kind of vehicle storage we're talking. So when I hear you talk about the health concerns, boy, I heard that in 2013. Are they that serious that we haven't done anything about them, or are they not that serious? As far as rodents, I suggest you call the Board of Health, Fran, because they'd shut down any other facility in town if that was the case. So,
Okay.
I'm just saying, if we go back to something like that, I'd say there's a possibility we could get there, but that's not what I'm hearing.
So I'd just like to respond back on that point, because it keeps coming up. That particular plan was not actually done by what I would call legitimate architects. They were done by interior designers. It frankly was a fundamentally flawed study that was done under the auspices of a previous town manager. And I could see the problems that were going on with the misunderstanding that those folks had of the entire process. However, at that time, I was still on staff here, so I did not have the opportunity to speak frankly. But frankly, the best way I could describe that study is bullshit. Thank you.
Well, they did thank you for your participation, but I wasn't trying to defend the study. I was trying to say they agreed with what you're saying, but nothing was done with it.
Okay.
So 13 years ago, we knew we had a vehicle storage problem, and we knew we had an air quality problem, and nothing was done.
So Dean, congratulations on being in a chair where you can now speak up. After living here for a certain number of years. All right.
Can I just say?
Fran?
One more thing. So what I'm hearing is cost, period. That's really the bottom line.
It's actually, cost is outcome. But let me share this insight that is 12 hours old, and I haven't even shared it with my colleagues yet. We got numbers on comparables Wednesday night. I wasn't able to analyze them yesterday because I was attending Dean's presentation at the Senior Center on the DPW building. So I finally got my chance to look at the numbers today. What I found was, if you look at the 20 comparable communities that they have right there, what you'll find is 2 of them are from New York, and you'll find Rockport is in there twice. And you will find that the number for Arlington is not consistent with what the town of Arlington says the square footage of their facility is. So, yeah, okay. But let's put it this way, hot off the press, I'm going to consider that just numbers that can be fixed. But what I did was run the population of those communities down one list, and then I ran the road miles for each of those communities down the list and did a ratio. And it turns out Acton is 20%, what we're proposing is 20% above the norm, even considering some of those communities like Arlington have a population of, 46,000. Yeah. So
Okay.
So my guess is, one of the questions you asked at a previous meeting that I thought was perfectly valid, what's our number? My guess is if you knock 20% off, we're in the ballpark.
We got it. We got it right there. Thanks for coming. Congratulations. Okay. So what I'm hearing is people actually do want to, Christy, I see you, people really do want to talk about this, but it's frustrating the heck out of you. And you're not sure it's going to get anywhere. So you got to decide. The parameters for deciding are, do you think that members of your group and members of the other group see the alternative to agreement as bad enough to push you all to do something that's distasteful, which is to accept compromise, because that's what it's about. And I'll note, it's obvious there's a lot of frustration, a lot of anger. It's very familiar looking to me from the last time I was in Acton. I remember the Acton FinCom as being in constant state of turmoil and frustration with the select board. That's how I remember it. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when I arrived, I was told the school committee gets anything they want in this town, and then the selectmen get to pick up the crumbs. And that was, now we're going back to 1979, all right? When there were no sidewalks to speak of, when the sewer project, which was declared an emergency in 1948, when they bought the Adams Street property, 1948, had not been authorized. This was 1979. And it took another, 15 years or whatever it was to. So projects here have always taken a long time. I don't think that's unusual. And I'll never forget the person who stood up at town meeting, I don't remember who it was, who said, well, I, in my professional life, just designed a sewer system for Cairo. So I'm going to tell you about sewer systems. That to me wrapped up Acton. There's always expertise that you didn't expect and you may not want, but it pops up just when you think you're getting somewhere. So this is all to say I'm sympathetic to what you're facing. You need to decide. But don't fool yourself. Unless you're really going to give up something, you're not going to reach agreement. And you need to decide the political questions, which Allison brought up about trust and whatever. I mean, I think a lot of people brought up good. I appreciate your willingness to bring things up. Kristen, I've been putting you off forever. Go ahead.
I just wanted to respond quickly to what Fran said, because for me, it gets to the crux of the issue. For me, it's not about cost, it's about affordability. And I'm happy to explain further, or if that's succinct enough.
Okay, that's
Oh,
interesting.
no, I can understand, yeah.
Important distinction, yeah. Fran gets it. Okay, are we ready to stop? Thank you for your patience. Your tax dollars may be out there at work sanding the road. Take care.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll call for a motion. Motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
And Christie, we got to do a roll call. Christie?
Aye.
Gang? Aye. Corinne?
Aye.
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 I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.